Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
Welcome back to the Boring Conversation podcast, everybody. Today, I, Jesse, am joined by Jacob, who you've met before, of course, and Adam, who you've also met before.
Hey, hi there.
Hey, hi there. So yeah, we're hopping on the pod today. It's been a little while since all three of us have been able to hop on at once. So I figure before we get into the meat of it, there's just a couple of things to mention right off the top. So first and foremost, as most of our listeners are probably aware, we have the tournament, the public tournament, and the MCCI coming up at Captain Con the weekend of February 4th. So we have some pretty cool sponsorship stuff that's going to start coming out pretty soon. I'm thinking that we're probably going to hear from Weird on the event before we get too much further on. And I'm actually going to be finalizing pools for the event probably this weekend. So I think that what we're probably going to do is I'm going to start teasing the event round by round. And then once all 5 rounds are spoiled, over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll put up some tournament packets. We also have a pretty cool way to do pairings, which I mentioned on the Schemes and Stones episode that posted very recently. We're going to elaborate a little bit more on that and how it pertains to the MCCI. So keep your eyes on the Boring Conversation feed on Facebook. And there's also going to be a good bit of information available in the Discord channel. I think I might actually make a Discord channel topic or room or whatever you want to call it, specifically for the events at Captain Con. So we'll be putting out some pretty cool stuff and teases coming up real soon. But in other probably more interesting news, and certainly something that you can sink your teeth into over the holiday season, Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about the next arc of your actual play podcast, Nastygram?
Yeah, so this one's kind of interesting because I'm actually not on it. This was recorded right after I had a baby, so it's been kind of fun for me to listen as a regular listener and see what is going on. But yeah, they're doing a D6, which is an old West End system, Star Wars actual play RPG, and it's really cool. They are playing Imperial officers on a Imperial space station. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I've been listening avidly as the episodes have been releasing, and it's just really cool because it's a setting. Obviously Star Wars. People do stuff in Star Wars all the time. People have done stuff in D20. There's the old West End system like you're using, but I feel like you don't really get to see people playing from the perspective of Imperials very often at all. So it's really playing out very, very well. The players and the game master are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, my experience, it's really hard to play bad guys in RPGs because it actually tends to get boring. But I think this is a setting and these are good enough players where there's a lot of nuance. It's not just we're the evil empire and we're going to go burn villages or whatever. It's really interesting.
Just because they're bad guys doesn't mean they're bad guys. So.
Indeed. So with that said, what are you guys drinking tonight? Adam, why don't you start us off? Tell us what you got.
Well, yeah, I haven't been around for a while. It's been a little bit, huh?
Yeah, hot minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got all kinds of craziness at work going on. The stress of the holidays. Live in a house full of a bunch of teenage girls, and just driving me up a wall and making me want to drink my Coquito here that a lovely lady at the station made for all of us in the office. Coquito, if you don't know what it is, it's like a coconut milk rum version of like a Puerto Rican eggnog.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, just sitting here on my wife's Trixie Mattel robe at the laptop, drinking my Coquito, hating on the teenage girls in my house. I'm living my Miss Hannigan fantasy right now. But that's what
Gotta
I'm.
be honest, that drink sounds pretty good though.
It's amazing. It's sneaky dangerous on you, but it's good.
Yeah. When I was when I went to Mexico, I don't know if you've ever had horchata, but it's like a rice milk beverage. Like they soak the rice and then they blend it up and they add like cinnamon and nutmeg and all that kind of stuff, and throw a little bit of rum in there, and that's basically rum chata. I mean, you can buy it, but getting the homemade stuff homemade is like next level.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. How about you, Jake? What you got?
I'm drinking Leaf Brown Ale.
Who's that by?
Leaf.
Oh, it's by Leaf, by
Yeah.
the brewery Leaf,
By Leaf
Yeah,
Brown.
Yeah.
and and it's a brown ale. All right, cool,
Yeah.
awesome. I am drinking my very last can of Mayflower Brewing Thanksgiving Ale 2021. It's a British old ale style, which is not really one that you see very often at all. Actually, Mayflower is the only American brewery that I've ever seen actually make one. It's going to be kind of like a barley wine, where it's like super malty, sweet. It's got a little bit of like hops to balance it out, but by and large, it finishes pretty sweet with a big full body. It just doesn't have quite the alcohol content that you'd see in like a barley wine. This one comes in at 6.7%. Barley wines are usually going to be more in like the 9 to 13% range.
Good stuff.
Yeah, So, what are we talking about today? Adam, why don't you bring us in?
Well, it's crazy that you asked. We're actually going to be talking about the Malifauxpen at Everwinter tournament that took place in Peabody, Mass. It was a 50 Soulstone 3-round event that was hosted by Battlegrounds Games and Hobbies. I unfortunately was not able to attend.
Oh, cool.
This
Are we gonna interview the people that came in first and second?
I think we should.
Cool.
I think we should. We'll have to try and get them on. Maybe plan it for. I mean, we could just do it today since it was Jesse and Jake, respectively. So so I'm gonna essentially we're gonna run through the rounds, talk about the strategy, the schemes, what you took, kind of a short breakdown of what your opponent took, why you took what you took, and then just kind of go through each highlights of the games. I think we should just roll right into it. First round was Turf War corner deployment. Jesse, let's see. You were playing against French. Have you played French before, ever, at all?
No, actually, it was the first time I met him. Real good guy. He's a relatively new player. He's one that, we kind of had a good time. I took it as an opportunity to try out Ivan Double Agent, the new title version of English Ivan. Spoiler alert: I only brought English Ivan to the tournament. I haven't played him seriously in quite some time, and I just wanted to see what I could do with soloing him at an event. So
yeah, that guy.
I took him every round. Yeah, he's that good. But I figured in this one, since French is a relatively new player, and I knew that it was going to be kind of a little bit slower a paced game, I decided I'd bring out Ivan too.
Yeah, that's always good to do. Why don't you just solo a tournament with Ivan? We just got a whole nice new meta of guys from Boston, and no big deal. Let's not.
I'll just take the most the most ball breaking master that I own.
Try to not scare them all away. That's fine. So going into this, obviously, like we said, the strategy was turf war. It was corner deployment, and your schemes were hidden martyrs, a research mission, catch and release, breakthrough, and assassinate. Now, you already said going into this that you had that you would be soloing Ivan, both versions throughout the day. Were you aware ahead of time of the strategies and schemes, or is that something they revealed on the day?
No, actually, this the guys at the Saugus Battlegrounds that host this tournament and another one that we went to fairly recently, they've kind of made it a habit of not releasing the scheme pools ahead of time. It's the first time that I've been to events that they haven't released the pools, and it was actually kind of refreshing. It made sure that we weren't just talking about the pools the whole time that we were driving up. We got to chat about other things, which was kind of cool. But it kind of made you think on your feet in terms of list building, which I kind of appreciated that. It was cool.
Now, you know what? I don't not like it. I kind of love it. I'm here for it. I think when we started off in like second edition, that was like the whole appeal was that you had to build for each game, and I actually like the fact that you kind of have to build on the spot because it takes away a lot of that pre-planned kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
To be honest, though, I think since so much of their meta is new players, they have so many people that have just started playing. I think when you're new, you don't look at the pool as much as you should. You just say like, "Here's the list." It's kind of like that Warhammer mentality of like, "I'm going to build my list before I go to the event."
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why I like seeing it the day of, because you can have like your base crew that you usually take, you know what I mean? But that I think the real tactical nature of building your crew based on the situations, which you're not going to even know before the day you go there, you know? Like even if you knew what the schemes and strats were, you have no idea what the terrain is.
Yeah, I try to do that. Like build a list and leave like maybe around 20 stones out, and fill those spots with that.
Yeah, just flex for what it's going to be, you know,
Hmm.
especially since like you can have your list and kind of your what you're going to do. But then, I mean, even with the titles now, there's going to be a lot of counterplay, um, just stuff where you're going to have to switch things out, even just to counter the opponent, you know.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so,
Which is a big deal against Ivan.
well, yeah, I mean, you have to build specifically for Ivan,
Yeah.
you know, or just take your lumps and know you're going to take it.
Yeah.
So in this case, it looks like French took his lumps. It was a 6-3 victory for Jesse with Ivan 2. French was playing a Zoraida 1 list. Was it like more of a traditional Zoraida 1 list, or was it kind of
Yeah.
keyword dependent?
Yeah, it was very much so um, a kind of a basic intro level Zoraida list. It was a very good one, especially for the pool. He ended up taking Groot Slaying, who I don't really see as often, but I do think is a pretty decent model. He actually took 3 Waldgeists, which that came into play more than I thought it was going to because there was a lot of forests and other severe terrain on the table. And then he also took 3 Silurids, which, I mean, quite frankly, for this pool, 3 Silurids is a pretty good choice. I mean, they just enable you to do things like breakthrough, martyrs, that kind of thing, research mission, with relative ease, and then they're great for turf war. So
Yeah.
I don't think he's wrong in taking 2 or 3 of those. So yeah, it was a relatively basic list, but it did work, and it was actually. Oh, I apologize. He also took. He didn't take 3 Silurids. He took 2 Silurids in the first mate. I just realized that.
You got to have something that can at least hit a little bit.
Yeah. So that's what it was. 2 Silurids in the first mate, and then he would have had a couple fewer stones as a result. Um, I took Ivan Double Agent, and for anybody who's not familiar with the way that Ivan Double Agent works, when you hire, so before you see your opponent's crew, you have to choose 2 upgrades that get attached to him face down from a list of 3. Um, you can double up, so you can take the same upgrade multiple times, and then during the start phase of turn 2 or later, you can flip over one face down plan upgrade to resolve an effect. So you can only flip over one per turn. You can't do them on turn 1. And the effects are somewhat varied. One of them is let me say what I took. So I took Secrets in Shadow and Explosive Turn of Events. There's also a third one called Turncoat. Secrets in Shadow, very straightforward. You summon a Deva into base contact with any opposing model on the table, and it comes in with slow. It's the only way that Ivan 2 has to summon. Um, when they're summoned, they do get to take a made to kill attack, so they actually do get an attack right away during the start phase, which is pretty unusual. So your opponent will have already, you'll both have already drawn hands and stuff, but it potentially, drains some resources out of your opponent before the turn really gets going, which is pretty strong. So explosive turn of events is when this upgrade is revealed and discarded, choose up to 3 friendly scheme or shadow markers. Enemy models within 3 inches of the chosen markers must pass a TN 14 defense duel or suffer 3 damage. So, fairly sizable duel. Defense 14 is no joke, and 3 damage is pretty significant, but it requires some setup. Um, I found it a little more difficult to set up than I thought it would be. We'll get into that later in the game. And then the last option is called Turncoat, which, when this upgrade's discarded, choose an enemy enforcer or minion. The chosen enemy model must take a non-bonus action that does not attach upgrades or list a model by name, chosen and controlled by this model. The chosen model receives a positive to any flips made during this action and any generated actions. So it's like a super obey that's unresistible. And you get positive flips on, attacks, damage, simple duels, anything else that you're doing with that model. Obviously, very powerful. Probably one of the downsides to it is that, and this is the reason I didn't take it, you can only choose enforcers or minions, and Zoraida is a crew that frequently will have low value minions or enforcers. Stuff like Adzi, Groot Slaying, Silurids, that kind of thing. And most of her big beaters are going to be henchmen that you can't target with Turncoat. So I decided it was a little bit too risky to take that, not knowing what my opponent's crew was going to be ahead of time.
I can see that.
Long-winded.
Jesse, when I saw you posted the list he bought, and I thought, like, oh wow, that's actually really good against Ivan, because the only thing to summon a Brock Inspector off of is Zoraida, who's willpower 8.
Right.
But then you ended up taking Ivan too, because you're a jerk.
Right.
Do you think that the way that you picked the master version after, do you think that helped? Like, did he actually tech low willpower to avoid those summons?
No, I don't think so. Again, being that he was a relatively new player, we kind of talked about it afterwards, and he's never played against Ivan. He only had a couple of games under his belt. He just took what he had. That said, had he chosen the list that he did, it would have been a very effective counter to Ivan getting any summons off, because the Silurids are all low willpower. Plus, they have stealth, which makes it really hard for Ivan to get to grips with them.
And then the other guys have armor, and everyone's got low willpower. It seems like it's all around a good list to take against Ivan 1.
Yeah, I can see, like, especially like with the wall guys, and maybe even I know with when you start getting into like Juju and stuff like that, you get into different willpower and stuff. But being able to attack anything in concealment, I mean, Ivan in particular likes to park in the middle of a forest, and being able to just reach out and touch him with like 4 models is kind of nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can see them being good choices into Ivan 1. Into Ivan 2, they didn't do quite as much. He works a little bit differently than Ivan 1, and I don't need to do a whole deep dive on him right now. But suffice it to say, he's not really hurt by the low willpowers. He's only helped by it because he's got 3 attack actions, 2 of them target willpower and 1 target move. Yeah. So his crew was relatively low willpowers and relatively low moves. So Ivan kind of was able to do whatever he wanted to, more or less.
So it looks like you scored 3 for turf war. You took research mission, which, I mean, we're always going to do with any kind of Ivan now.
Yeah.
And then you got 1 from Hidden Martyrs. What were your Hidden Martyr models?
Sure. So the crew that I ended up bringing in for this one was Ivan with those 2 upgrades that I mentioned. I took Mordrake, of course, and then I took Corvus Rook. I hired a Brock Inspector, Gibson DeWalt, Eva, Haven Hand, a new model, Jin Bakara. That's the Malifaux Burns, Last Blossom, and Dua, or DUA model. I took a Nocturne with a 6-stone cache. So for the Martyrs targets, I ended up, excuse me, I ended up taking Martyrs on the, what do you call it? The Brock Inspector and the Nocturne.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you figure, like, I didn't know what his... I thought that the Brock Inspector was going to end up getting just slowly whittled down and killed. It was kind of a bad call. Because when I started looking at his list, I was like, he doesn't really have anything that can seriously threaten the Brock Inspector, so it was kind of a silly choice. Mm-hmm. That said, once I realized that, I was like, oh, well, that's fine. I'll just run the Nocturne and get it killed, and then he'll never get a chance to kill the Brock Inspector, so I'll score my 2 points there.
Yeah, oddly enough, the best thing to attack the Brock Inspector would be the Brock Inspector itself with Zoraida.
Right.
And you can't even do that, so...
Can't really do that. So in retrospect, it did work out okay. The Nocturne never ended up getting killed though, so it just didn't pan out. I got the 1 point, the end game point for Hidden Martyrs, and then like you said, I got the 2 research mission.
Yeah, that doesn't strike me as a Zoraida crew that's really going to be trying to kill your stuff too much. It seems very schemy.
And that's looking. I'm just looking at it, and I know for me at least, I play Turf 4 as a little bit more of an aggressive game, just like as far as board space. And it's twofold: killing models flips them to flips the markers to neutral and stuff. So I do tend to play a little more of an aggressive crew, and I'm just looking at that crew, and it's like there's really no punch, you know.
Yeah, there wasn't too much punch. I mean, I ended up getting the first mate sort of tied up, and his stone pool was relatively low, so like the first mate can hit hard, but he's very resource intensive. You need to dedicate stones and cards to getting him up to, min 3 or min 4. You also need to dedicate typically stones to, getting his leap off. So he didn't really have the resources to put into making him hit real hard. And I got a lucky, I got a lucky hit on the Groot Slaying turn 1 with Ivan. I ended up flipping into a red Joker damage. So, Groot Slaying can't stone, and he didn't really have any healing in the crew. So once I did 6 to him with Ivan, I mean, he was hurting. It didn't take too much more to kill him after that. He ended up dying, I think, turn 1.
Yeah. It's actually not a bad crew. The Zoraida crew wise, it's not a bad crew for the second and third round. It's way better for the second and third round than it was for this particular round.
Yeah. But I mean, kind of highlights of the game. I mean, really, I really, really liked Ivan, Double Agent. He's really cool. The cool thing about him is that if you end up getting put into a matchup against something that's really strong against Ivan 1, Ivan 2 plays differently enough that you can tech him in, and kind of, maybe zig when your opponent expects you to zag. His one thing that's kind of cool about him, which I didn't really think about until I got to playing him, is his ranged attack targets move. And Mordrake and a couple of other models that he has access to can give out staggered. So you can get your opponent down to move 3, move 4 versus your stat 5. And then it's also a projectile, which is pretty cool, especially because he gets the positive flips from like friendly fire, concealment, and distracted. So, I mean, he would end up being on typically double positives every time that I used Gloomstrike, because I'm shooting into combat and I'm shooting, past concealment. So it was more effective than I thought it was going to be. In the 2-4-5 damage track, because you're typically flipping pretty high, I ended up getting moderates on it a lot more than I expected to, which was pretty cool.
So let me ask
you
something quick,
yeah,
because it kind of plays into this. When you were picking masters, when you're declaring masters, were you declaring titles as well, or were you simply declaring the master and then you found out upon crew reveal which version of the master you took?
The second one. We played it. Originally, they said that they were going to have everybody declare their master title during like pairings.
Okay.
But once they made that decision before the cards became available in the app. Once all the cards became available in the app, they didn't really see much need to do that anymore.
It was just, I'm playing Ivan, and then you made Cruz, and then you revealed the Cruz selection. I picked Ivan 2.
Yep.
Okay, well that's a little more ball busting when it comes to Ivan then. Because if you tech against Ivan 1 and you fall into Ivan 2, you're going to get spanked. You're going to get punished.
I mean, the tech that you take against Ivan 1 is... I mean, still, a lot of it's still very effective against Ivan 2, but the willpower thing doesn't do anything to help you.
I mean, armor and destroying markers is going to be good in either crew.
Yep. One of the things that's really good against Ivan 1 that isn't quite as good against Ivan 2 is moving him away from his shadow markers, like disrupting his placement. Usually to do that, you need to be in melee combat. There isn't really too much that you can do to mess up somebody's placement from range. But the way that Ivan Double Agent works is he actually has a 1-inch aura of hazardous distracted 1 around him. So if you charge him after you resolve the charge move, you gain distracted before you take the attack. So on the first attack, you're distracted.
That's silly.
And then after that attack resolves, you gain distracted again because that was another action inside hazardous. So you're always at you're pretty much always distracted when you attack him. Now that said, he himself does not have a melee attack, so you can't just like charge him into the middle without losing some action efficiency. Because I mean, charging him doesn't do anything aside from the move. You probably want to be doing getting in different ways.
Yeah.
And then he's got a cool ability where enemy models with distracted are never considered to be engaging him. So just because his primary attack, Gloom Strike, is a projectile, so normally you couldn't use that when you're in melee, but if your opponent's distracted because they're in your hazardous aura, then they're not engaging you and you can shoot anyway, which is pretty cool.
So, sounds like you had a successful round one. So far, you want to know. You're going to be at the top table? Nah, maybe not. I don't know. 3-point swing. I'm sure. Was there any bigger swings that you know of, or no?
I'm not really sure. I think that there were quite a lot of draws at this event. Even in round one, there were several draws. I think I was pretty solidly like high end of mid table going into round two.
Jake, you had a game.
So
who
speaking
did you
of
play?
several draws, I played against Sam. So he is not a new player. Him and his buddy Doug are kind of the guys who have created the Boston meta. He's a
Brandon
pretty
too.
experienced.
Don't forget Brandon.
Oh, and Brandon, yeah, who was running the event. Well, I guess Sam was co-running as well,
Yeah.
but Sam was the guy I didn't want to play round one. He just won a tournament down in Connecticut. I think he went Ophelia all 3 rounds, and actually at the last tournament up in Boston, I played against him on table 2 in the third round and lost. And he played Ophelia that game too. And so going into this tournament, he played Ophelia. I was ready for Ophelia this time because I was playing Arcanist, and I brought Mayfang the Foreman. So that's the title version of Mayfang.
Let me ask you something. Overall, would you say there were more Malifaux Burns titles being used, or more like original version masters? So was there a healthy mix? Like, did it seem like the new hotness was dominating, or?
Out of my 3 games, I played titles all 3 games. But my opponents, I only played 1 title out of the 3 games.
Yeah, I played the Ivan title game 1, and none of my opponents all day played any of the new titles.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So a healthy mix.
Yeah. So bringing in Mayfang 2, what made you decide to take her into this?
So I really hate Ophelia, but that I could go on for hours about how busted that keyword is. But I basically wanted to completely tech against Ophelia. So I went with Mayfang 2, and I took a bunch of gremlins because that's how you fight gremlins. I took 3 survivors. I took the Rockhopper. I took Sparks. Those are all gremlin models.
Yep.
And I also took the Metal Golem, of course, because you can't leave home without him. But Mayfang 2, she offers a lot of survivability to the crew, a lot of healing, a lot of condition, like shielded and stuff like that. And that stuff just, is how you fight a shooting crew like Ophelia.
Well,
Like,
especially all that plink damage. You got the shielding take off of that, and then the armor.
Yeah, when you've got armor and like shielded 4 on everything, it's really hard to do any damage to the crew. And then 1 or 2 get through here and there, and May just heals it up. And then so the big reason I wanted all these gremlins is to offset all of Ophelia's crew's abilities. So all my stuff is height 1, so he doesn't get those bonuses. All my stuff is like on a stat 5, so he's not getting like the shielded or anything like that.
Yep.
It ended up being pretty effective. I didn't lose an entire model, a model the whole game.
Oh wow.
which against Ophelia is pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
All that shielded really helps against those plate crews. Like it normally bringing armor into that kind of crew is kind of a bad idea as it is anyway, because you're just going to keep taking that plate damage, and all of a sudden your 8 wound model is dead despite having armor too. But
Right.
with the shielded, being able to just knock it down to 0 each time for a couple of them is huge.
Yeah, there were entire it was original Ophelia. So there were entire Ophelia activations where she didn't do any damage.
Yeah, just stripped away the shielded.
Yep. Yep.
That's crazy. Um, yeah, no, I like that a lot, and it's interesting. You actually played that almost that same exact crew in a game we played. I want to say last month. You played Neil Henry in that game, as opposed to the Metal Golem.
Yeah.
Was that a good switch? Do you think?
Well, I think I played Neil Henry against you because you had a bunch of constructs.
I did. I did.
So I think I went Metal Golem just because I knew I was going to need the armor. And it's just, I mean, it's when you get shielded on the Metal Golem with armor 2, it's really hard to take it down. And I also knew I needed something that could get in his face and kind of disrupt his shooting phase by being in combat with all of his stuff.
Yeah, just make her really tie into having to deal with him.
Yeah.
With shielded a million.
The
I
MVP of the game for me was actually the Rockhopper, though.
That is a solid little model. It really is. When we played it the other day, and I was like, "Wow, that you got some point value there."
Yeah, the biggest thing is, the Gremlin Emissary. What's it called, Jesse?
Lucky Emissary.
The Lucky Emissary. That thing is brutal. Like, it runs over your whole crew and destroys all your markers and just does a little bit of damage to everything. But against me, it's not doing any damage because it's just hitting shielded. And then it's not destroying my scrap markers because of the Rockhopper, and that was huge. That helped me to win the game. The fact that he couldn't remove my scrap markers.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Well, not win the game. Sorry, it was a draw.
Well, it helped
yeah.
you not lose the game.
Yeah. We both ended up getting 1 point on the strat, which I'm kicking myself because I realized afterwards that I played it wrong and could have got a second. But that's in hindsight. And then I took Hidden Martyrs, which I obviously didn't score because I didn't lose any models, on one of my survivors and Sparks. I find that Sparks is usually the guy that dies because he doesn't have any armor. And he's so annoying that people just want to get rid of him so that they get rid of that hazardous aura and the command construct ability.
Way better now he's a henchman.
Yeah, he's really solid. But he doesn't have any defense really other than being a henchman. So he does get targeted just because he's the obvious target. And then the survivors are really hard to kill. Literally, they're hard to kill.
Yeah.
But didn't score anything on that. Got 1 point on catch and release. So I knew he was gonna, rush Francois at me. So that was just an easy point.
Yeah.
So you hold on. So you said you took Hidden Martyrs, and you took Catch and Release.
Yeah.
And you scored 1 strat point.
1 strat, one strategy point, 1 scheme point.
Well, you would have scored the end game point for Hidden Martyrs, right? So you should have been at 3 points.
Yeah, you're right. Damn. So I should have had 4 points because I should have scored a second strat point as well.
Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, a situation like that had cost me one of the TFL games. I want to say a couple of years ago. It was like I don't know, a couple hours after the fact. It's like, God damn, I should have won that game 1 point. God damn. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Do you remember that
meal?
With the zombie.
When you suddenly realized what had happened.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Not cool. I digress. All right. So, I mean, both no losses round 1, which is nice. So, I don't know. Had I had gone with my Neverborn, I would have strongly considered Pandora. I really like Pandora in Turf War a lot. But I think particularly brutal that round would have been that Zoraida 1 Pandy 2 combo list. with the where she's summoning in the voodoo doll, and then Vasilisa is summoning in something, and then Pandora Dew is summoning all over the place. Uh, that would have just really did it for me, especially with research mission in the pool. Just being able to spam summon poltergeists and destroy every marker.
Yeah, and you have pretty easy ways to get scrap markers on the other side of the board as well. And with turf markers in play, it does make it relatively easy to get that third marker type. Just drop a ski marker or whatever, and it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it does. I think I go for maybe Widow Weaver summoning instead of Vasilisa summoning in this game. Just
so you can get the webs too.
Yeah, so you can get the webs, and just because it's easier to do with the henchmen, if you need the stone for it, I think that's where I would have gone with this one.
Cool. Yeah, I think that would have been really solid. That's not a list that I would enjoy playing against.
Yeah, no, it's brutal.
Yeah. It's no fun.
So round 2, we're going in Jesse 1-0, and Jake is 0-0-1. The strategy is Symbols of Authority with a flank deployment. Your schemes are outflank, bait and switch, detonate charges, vendetta, and deathbeds. Let's start with Jake this time. Jake, who did you play in this round?
So I played against Kieran, who was playing Rezer Yanlo, and I was playing Abominable Raspy. So that's the Raspy title version.
I know you've been kind of just like drooling over her.
Yeah, I've been
figuring her out.
Very excited to get her on the table. I mean, I actually really like the original one, but I also played 2 of the Cultgeists, so the new minion, and they were very cool. They bring a lot of extra movement to the crew, like a bunch of just little tiny pushes. I felt pretty confident going into this game because I feel like I actually know Jan Lo better than I know Rasputina. So I knew all of his stuff like the back of my hand. And he was kind of a newer player, and he's like, "Oh, I've never played against against Raspy," and I'm like, "Oh, I've played with Jan Lo many times." But I mean, he played a pretty standard Jan Lo list, like nothing wrong with it. 2 Coquito, Yin, Manos, Chiaki, Izamu, pretty standard stuff. And I guess I'm trying to think of what sort of stood out for me. I think I only summoned 1 time with Raspy. I know that's like supposed to be her big thing on that title version, but what was really amazing for her, what really made a big difference was Ice in the Veins, which is every time a December model is pushed, it gains shielded. That is huge because that crew pushes itself around a lot. So much like in that first game, I don't think I lost a model because they just had a bunch of shielded on them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I also, like I said, I know Jan Lo pretty well, so I kind of had a good idea of what he was trying to do. He put Manos on the flank, and he tried to get outflank. I went real hard at Manos and took him out. And on turn 3, I took him out, and then he conceded the game. And I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he was like, "Yeah, I had Vendetta with Manos, and then outflank, and I fully controlled one flank, so one corner, so there was no way he was going to score it, and all of my markers were kind of in my control zone as well. So he's like, I literally just there's no way for me to score any points."
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. But I mean, that's the problem with Manos is super durable, but if you have a way to deal with him, he can be a real linchpin in a Jan Lo crew. Like when it comes to scoring points, he can be just depend on him so much.
Yeah, I mean, he's really doing a lot of that running and scheming, and if he's not doing that, he's chasing down the schemers.
Yeah, and one of the big things is you can't charge him. He's got that what is it, spear wall or something like that?
Yeah.
But
extended reach, yeah.
Extended reach, yeah. But with the Cultgeists, they have a bonus action that pushes stuff. So I was always able to like push my ice golem in and then attack with it, stuff like that. So I never had to actually charge and waste any AP. And then this is the coolest thing that this new Raspy has is that trigger where you push a model and then drop an ice pillar in contact with it, and it can't move until that ice pillar is removed, because that nails down things that are used to leaping away and stuff like that.
That's real solid.
So I, pull him in with that, drop an ice pillar on him, and then give him slow. And now all of a sudden on his turn, all he can do is remove that ice pillar and leap, and that's not going to get you far enough away to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she can do a lot of the. She does a lot of the pushing that you would normally take like Snowstorm for.
Yeah, I took Snowstorm, but in retrospect, I actually don't know if you really need him anymore.
You don't, because I mean, with Northern Wind, she's just pushing everything around herself.
Yeah,
if she's not attacking something and she doesn't need, she can summon and then just push bottles around.
Yeah.
I mean,
one kind of neat thing about Snowstorm, he does have the push, so he is giving everyone shielded. But he also he's got a bonus ability that can only affect models with the Demise Frozen Heart, which normally it used to just be the Ice Golem and the Gammon, but now it's the summons as well, because the summons come in with that Frozen Heart.
Yeah, with the upgrade.
Yeah, so it's neat. I mean, you're hardly ever going to use it because you always want to use that on the Ice Golem. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, do you build the crew differently with her than you would with Raspy 1?
Yeah. So usually with Raspy 1, I think the silent one is an auto take. In Raspy 2, I think you end up taking one minion, mostly so you can give it arcane training. But which minion you take isn't an auto pick anymore, because you're going to summon whatever minions you want. So the minion that you take when list building is the one that you need to score points with.
Yeah.
So, for example, I did take the silent one, but I took the silent one because I took Vendetta. So, if there had been something else that I needed more mobility for, I might have actually taken an Ice Dancer.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, I mean, because it has to be a minion, so maybe an Ice Dancer. I can't think of really anything living minion wise that would be schemy enough for him. So yeah, no, I think she's solid. I think she has game. And this was it was a 8-0? Is that what it was? Or
No, I ended up, we kind of just like talked it through and ended up doing I think we did 6-1 is what we decided on, because he did score one strategy point. And I was like, hey, I know I can't score Vendetta, because, well, I couldn't score the second point of Vendetta because I killed Manos too fast.
yeah.
Which was kind of like, I knew it was worth it.
But... it's funny, every time I play Vendetta, that happens to me every time.
Yeah, but it's usually you kind of know it's going to happen, but it sometimes it's just worth it.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, I know I'm missing this victory point, but am I stopping him from getting 2 victory points?
Yeah, you got to weigh that out, but it's usually just take out the model, especially if it's something that's significant to the crew.
Yeah, this was a new experience for me. I've never had someone like, well, that's not true. Until very recently, I hadn't had anyone say concede a game before the time ran out. So I didn't really know what to do. And I feel like that's something. I mean, I get it. If there's no way you can win and you want to quit, you shouldn't be forced to play. But I feel like there should maybe be like a system in place or something. Like there should be a way it's done. I don't know. I was just kind of like, how do I resolve this in a way that's not dickish?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just come to a gentleman's agreement and like realistically look at it and determine what's more probable than not you would have scored, assuming that your opponent is, cooperative with that. I mean,
he was a really, really nice guy, too. Yeah.
I'm finding a lot of those Boston guys are pretty solid. It's nice having a new, fresh influx of players into the meta up here.
And it was also really nice to have an hour where I could just watch other people's game and drink beer.
Also a positive. Jesse, what'd you have for round 2? You played Andreas?
Yes, Andreas.
And it looks like you took Ivan 1 and he took Jedza 1. So we had a Explorer Society face-off.
Yeah, and I've actually played Andreas. I played him at the last event that they hosted in Saugus, and he actually played Ivan 1 against my Ophelia in that game. So it was kind of nice that I was playing against somebody who knew how Ivan worked, and I didn't have to like kind of explain things as we go, because I always try to be, especially given that there are some newer players in this meta, I want to make sure that I'm trying to foster a fun game for them. But he already knew what all my stuff did. So yeah, it ended up 8-1. I took the game with full points. He ended up scoring 1 point for symbols, and that was it. Um, for my crew, I took English Ivan with Hidden Agenda, Mr. Mordrake, Corvus, Gibson, The Damned as an out of keyword hire, Eva, Nocturne, and an Operative with 5 stones remaining. And my opponent took Jedza and Sophie, of course, Mikhail, Vernon and Wells, The Damned, a Lamplighter, Austera and Twig, and a surveyor rather with 5 stones. My thinking with the crew was I took the Damned because one of the only things that Ivan can somewhat struggle in terms of strategies is symbols. He doesn't really have a great symbols runner, and to be quite honest, there aren't a ton of great symbols runners in Explorer Society in general. They have a lot of fast models like botanists and Vernon and Wells and a few other things, but they don't have stuff that can get out of engagement without disengaging, and then be able to interact to grab a symbol.
I mean, you have
So,
Eva.
I mean, you do have Eva, but you can't necessarily guarantee that she's going to be in a position that she can secret passage and then interact right away. So it does work sometimes, but not all the time. I mean, you kind of want 2 symbols runners anyway. Like, you don't want to be relying on one model for all 4 of your points. Otherwise, you get into a bad situation where your opponent kills that model, and then you don't have any way to score the strat. Like, you really need to have two models that can run it, which is kind of what I took this crew for.
I mean, Nocturnes are pretty fast too, though, right?
Nocturnes are fast, but the thing with Nocturnes is that a lot of times their turn 1 is taken up with like moving Ivan up, putting out some distracted. Frequently, you'll end up with a Nocturne not moving at all turn 1. It just sits in place and uses Displace twice, which kind of puts them behind. So you're not going to be able to score anything turn 2 with them. You might be able to score turn 3, but I mean, that's pretty much it.
I'm actually really surprised not to see at least one botanist in here.
I don't usually play botanists in symbols. I usually play them in ley lines. But they're certainly good models. They just require a lot more setup. Like you have to do like a janky turn 1 deployment, and you have to just kind of hope that your opponent doesn't have an alpha crew that can, disrupt your ability to get those shadow markers out, pick them up, get the grow tokens out. It's very strong, but it does require some setup, and I don't think that they're fantastic in this pool. Nor do I feel like they're great in symbols. So that's why I went with the Damned instead.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking they can get particularly fast, very quickly. So
yeah, I mean, move 6 with Onward is great, and they would be very good for they'd be very good for outflank. They'd be probably a little bit of a liability in Vendetta, because it's not like they're impossible to kill. I mean, like, if they get 2 grow tokens, then defense 7 is great, and they do have some self heals, but I mean, they're not an impossible Vendetta target, and your opponent's going to need to kill them to stop you from scoring the strat anyway, so not unreasonable.
I guess my question is, the Lamplighters lamp tokens, lamp markers, those are terrain markers, are they not?
They are.
So you could use those to fuel the botanist?
Well, they're not destructible terrain markers. You have to have some way to remove non-destructible terrain.
Oh, so it's if it's removed, not remove the marker. I thought I was under the impression that it removed the marker to do that, but you have to actually have something else to remove it.
Yeah, it's if a marker is removed within an aura of them. And it has to be like a terrain. I think it has to be a terrain or corpse marker, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, no, I knew the the lamps were terrain markers. I assumed they were terrain markers. I didn't realize you had to destroy them separately.
But with Ivan and shadow markers, that must happen super fast.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it many times in the past. You can play 2 botanists and get 2 grow tokens on both of them turn 1. So now you have 2 defense 7, move 6, size 4, planted roots, ley lines monsters. But I didn't do that this game. So
Well, I was just curious.
yeah, of course. My opponent ended up taking Jedza. I already did his whole crew. Never mind.
Yeah,
I put a little edit in there. So yeah, I mean, the game kind of started out, pretty good. It was a little. One of the things that he did with his crew, I don't know if he did it intentionally or not, but I only had 2 models that I could summon Brock Inspectors off of. One of them was Vernon and Wells, who puts me on a negative flip when I attack anything within a 2-inch aura of them, including themselves, for willpower attacks. And Jedza, who's willpower 8. So, like, I can't bank on being able to land an attack on Jedza. I was going to have to do some goofy shit to make that happen. But he played Vernon, and I'm like, okay, there's a Brock Inspector target. He moved the Damned and Vernon and Wells off to like sort of the same flank, so that one could start working on outflank and the other one could do like symbols duty. Unfortunately, because I had enough movement where I was able to like displace Ivan twice before he activated, and then use Shade Step to get close enough to be able to ping Vernon and Wells 3 times on turn 1. I was able to hit Vernon and Wells once, summon a Brock Inspector, and then hit them 2 more times and kill them, even with the Arcane Shield and the Hard to Kill.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're looking at, even with their negative, you're still looking at a positive if you do things right.
Yeah, I mean, I was shooting through concealment and I had distracted, so I was still on a positive. I had to flip one of the distracted, or one of the positives into a crow, so I was still on a straight flip. And I didn't have to like use any extra AP to focus or anything like that. So I mean, it's good, but it's not a particularly good counter. And if he hadn't taken Vernon and Wells with that willpower 6, I wouldn't have been able to summon a Brock Inspector onto that quadrant, which ended up threatening the Damned, because now he had just the Damned left against my Damned and a Brock Inspector. So things were not looking good over there.
Yeah.
The other thing he did was he played super, super, super cagey. Like he had his Jedza ball, and I think he was trying to hide behind a forest that was dense, so I couldn't see through it to shoot him. And he was using Austera and Twig to just like, throw birds at me, ignoring line of sight. But his whole crew just kind of ended up getting behind that forest. So he had a ball of models that I was able to kind of attack with impunity, because nothing really came out to attack me. So like first turn, Ivan killed Vernon and Wells, summoned the Brock Inspector. Second turn, what ended up happening was I had Corvus up close to the middle. I was holding Ivan's activation until later, and I ended up going early with Corvus, earlier than I usually do with Corvus, because I was just trying to like stall activations. And I ended up getting his backroom dealings off on my opponent's surveyor, so I could see his hand. So he shows me his hand, and he's got 2 12s, a 10, and like a 9 or something like that. I'm holding a red Joker. So as soon as I saw his hand, I was like, oh shit, I can summon on Jedza, because all he has is a 12. As long as he doesn't flip a 13,
you got him.
I got him. I'm going to be at a double negative, but I'll be able to get a Brock Inspector into the middle of his bubble. And a Brock Inspector in the middle of a Jedza bubble is horrifying, because Withering Away makes it so that her life tokens don't work. She can't heal anything. It's got Terrifying. He's in the middle of a bunch of models, so he can use Hallowed Glory just to like hand out unresistible damage. It was a total nightmare. I ended up actually, when I saw that I could get the Brocken, I got a little too greedy, and I used Ivan before I should have. I should have waited for Mikhail to go.
Yeah.
So that he didn't have anything left that could really threaten the Brocken. I summoned it earlier than I should have. And then before the Brocken got to activate, Mikhail got lucky, hit a red Joker, and then hit it a second time and killed it. So that was kind of a bummer. But at that point, I was like, okay, I've got things kind of under control. His bubble is really far away from me. He's not in a position to be able to score really any scheme points because I've got all of his other models pinned down. And then on Ivan's next activation, or the other actions on that Ivan activation, so he summoned the Brock Inspector on Jedza, and then I was like, I don't really have any other great targets for him to attack. I'm just going to start throwing shockwaves into the middle of his crew. And when Ivan drops his shockwaves, he also drops shadow markers.
Yep.
So I ended up with like 3 or 4 shadow markers in the middle of his crew. And then the next turn, I won initiative, and I drew into a 13 crow. So I threw Mordrake in, attacked Jedza with Mordrake, and when I flipped the attack, I flipped a red Joker.
Oh, God.
So I got the Bury in Shadows trigger, and I put Jedza into one of the shadow markers. And then his second attack, he attacked Mikhail, and I cheated in the 13 crow. I had to hit Mikhail first because he had caught in the ring. So I buried Mikhail, and then the second attack I attacked Jedza and buried her in a different shadow marker.
Man, that berry trigger, it's gotta go.
It's filthy.
Gotta go. It's so powerful on a totem that
Yeah.
is already really good
That
with a
doesn't die?
master that is the best. Right. It's
Correct.
so overpowered.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of setup. And it does compete for high crows, which Ivan wants his high crows. So like it doesn't, in all the games I've played with Ivan, I'm going to be honest, it's really only come up like 4 or 5 times. But when it comes up, it's a big fucking deal. It's not like playing against Euripides where Thune is going to bury one of your dudes in ice every single game. It's not nearly as reliable as that, but it still is a very big deal.
But that's the thing. Like, it doesn't have to be. It's such a super good ability, but it's overshadowed by all the other super good abilities. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like,
Yeah, it's the sum of the parts.
yeah. I mean, just a quick hot take. If you haven't gotten it yet, Ivan is super good. So there's like you can talk about tiers all you want in this game, and like a lot of times broken is overused. I've done it. I'm guilty. But in this case, I mean, like there's certain masters. Ivan is definitely one of them that's just full blown S tier.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. Ivan's not going to make it. Ivan and probably a couple other Explorers models in particular aren't going to make it out of whenever the next errata comes out. I'm sure that they're on the chopping block. They've got to get adjusted. Ivan is too good. He is.
He really,
like I never.
Really is.
Every single time that I play him, I don't think I've ever been worried about losing a game. It's really almost never even a contest.
Yeah,
I think he's at that level where it's he's so good that you kind of don't want to play him. Like you almost feel bad playing him. Like
Yeah,
like that's kind of how I'm feeling with Karai too. I'm like she's so cool. I want to play her, but also like it's oppressive.
Yeah. It's one of the coolest crews that I own, and it's one of the ones that I enjoy playing the most. I love the theme, I love the aesthetic, I love the way it plays, I love all the interactions that the crew has. That said, I brought him to this event, and I'm probably never going to play him again until he gets eroded.
So, like, I mean, he's like Sandeep level power in like 2E. I mean, like in 2E, you didn't play Arcanist, you played Sandeep. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, where Ivan is right now, where he's just
well, the rest
so
of his faction's
powerful.
really good.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, Cadmus is super strong.
Cadmus
Jed's
is super
strong.
But my point being that Ivan does everything really, really well.
Yeah, he does. So, I mean, speaking of doing things really well and busted shit, so after I buried both of those models, my opponent had a choice of which one of his models he wanted to activate, and there was one of his 3 models that was left in the bubble that could have activated and popped both Mikhail and Jedza out of shadow markers, just with a couple of AP. He unfortunately chose the wrong model that wasn't in base contact with both markers, broke Jedza out, but Mikhail stayed in the shadow marker, and it left a shadow marker in the middle of his crew. And earlier in the game, he'd had his surveyor drop a geode marker close to his crew. And it just so happened that it was close enough that Evo was able to, on the next activation, secret passage to the geode, charge into the middle of his crew, do an attack that didn't matter, and then use lock away on the marker that had Mikhail in it. So that now none of his models that were around that shadow marker could do anything except for walk and disengage. And that was his whole crew.
That's awful.
So it was bad. So, he activated and he started saying, okay, well, I'm going to break this model. I'm going to break that shadow marker. And I had that look on my face and I'm like, I'm really sorry, Andreas. You can't do anything aside from walk and disengage. Like there's nothing you can do. And he just kind of looked at the table and he looked at the fact that his damned was about to die. And he ended up conceding. So, the game ended at the end of turn 3. The way that the TO was handling concessions was, the winning player scores max points unless there are any that they cannot score, like a vendetta if their target's dead, or this, that, and the other. So they're going to score the max possible points.
Yeah.
And then your opponent, the conceding player, only leaves with the points that they have on the table at that time.
I didn't know we were doing it that way.
Yeah.
We ended up doing it, but
yeah, I mean, we kind of talked out the game, and there wasn't really any way that he'd be able to score any of his scheme points anyway. He ended up taking he got 1 point for symbols, and then for his schemes, he had taken detonate charges and outflank. Obviously, I killed his models that would be able to score outflank, and while I did have some models that were really close to his crew and he could use lamplighters to drop markers for detonate, I had taken the operatives specifically because I saw that there were quite a few scheme marker schemes in the pool. There was deathbeds, detonate charges, and I expected that my opponent was probably going to end up taking one and outflank, 1 or 2 schemes that required markers. And operatives have arson, which is the same thing that Iggy has. So my operative, literally, the whole plan was just get it to mid-table and hold its activation until end of turn, or when I start seeing scheme markers get put out that I don't think will be able to be replaced by the end of the turn, and just arson the shit out of stuff. And that's what it did. Yeah. I mean, it picked up every scheme marker that he dropped at range with nothing he could do about it.
It's a solid plan. They're really good for that. Yeah. That's why he's so good.
That's literally the reason that I take operatives. I don't really... I mean, like, Infiltrator is cute, and there's some fun stuff you can do with it. There's some neat interactions and stuff that you can deny your opponent being able to do. But Arson is the reason that I take that model. Yeah.
I'm looking at this pool and I'm thinking
Pandy too.
I would have taken puppets all the way.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, Hanamatsu with the Corfi duet and Facilis.
Yeah, definitely taking my puppets. Just bouncing all over the table. Outflanks nice and easy. I mean, symbols, you can't even really stop symbols. So
yeah, I've noticed that Hanamatsu crew is really good at breaking into 2 separate sort of bubbles that can operate independently. So it's really good for stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Vasilis is super fast, and then she can just like pick up and carry her Wicked Doll or whatever she's got, and then like the Corfi duet. Good luck stopping it. I mean, it's just super fast and just janky and gets out of everything. And I mean, it's a ton of stones, but it's worth every single stone. I find I barely even split it in that crew, because it does what it needs to, and it has the synergies. But
yeah, I think it would have been a great pick into that round for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's basically the perfect pool for it.
Yeah, I mean, outflank and detonate's super easy. So we're going into round 2 now, and we have
round 3.
We're going into out of round 2 into round 3. Jesse is now 2-0. Jake is 1-0-1. Jesse's got himself a healthy little differential. And then we go into ley lines, standard deployment, with the strategy, with the schemes, being let them bleed, spread them out, break through, clean jump, and assassinate. Jesse, we're going to start with your game this time. You played into Rich. At this point, are you guys top table?
Yeah, we were top table.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually played against Rich at top table in the last event that they played in Saugus. So he and I already kind of we'd met, we played each other, we had a really good game last time, and we were anticipating a good game this time, which is what we got. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
A little bit one sided, but it was still a fun game. He's a great opponent.
And who did you take into this one? Ivan 1 or Ivan 2?
I did Ivan 1. My opponent took Asami 1.
Interesting.
Yep. He had played Asami 2 the last time that we had played at top table. I wasn't really surprised to see him play Asami 1 in this particular pool. It's a pretty good one for her. One thing that Asami 2 is a little susceptible to is getting assassinated. She doesn't really have much in the way of defenses aside from her arcane shield. Asami 1 obviously has protected, and she generally is a little bit further from the action. So I think that she was a good choice into this. I ended up taking Ivan 1 with Hidden Agenda, Mordrake, Corvus, Gibson, Eva, a Nocturne, Intrepid Effigy with Effigy of Fate, and Vernon and Wells with a 5-stone pool. My opponent took Asami 1 with Amanjaku, Amanozako, Ohaguro Batari, 1 Yudo, 2 Yokai, and a Tengu with 9 stones. So he had a pretty fast, relatively schemy crew. He didn't hire in any Joraguma. I guess he was probably planning on summoning either Joraguma or Obsidian Oni. I assume he's probably planning on summoning Obsidian Oni because they can remove the shadow markers, which is kind of what he started to do. One thing that ended up hurting him in this game is, again, the whole willpower 6 thing. He had a couple of willpower 6 targets that I was able to summon some Brocken off of, which is what ended up happening even starting in turn 1. So the game started off pretty cagey. I ended up using Vernon and Wells for my ley lines marker, and he used one of his yokai he used his 1 Yudo for his ley line carrier. So, it was a little bit of just jockeying for position. Because I took the Nocturne and the Effigy in this game, I was able to actually get quite a bit of movement out of Ivan before he activated. So I started out with the Effigy, moving him up would lead the way, and then moving up Mordrake as well. And then the the Nocturne ended up moving Ivan up a couple of times, making sure that he was inside the shadow of the concealment auras from Mordrake so that he could get some extra distracted on him. That way, before Ivan even activated, I mean, he was probably I would say probably 7-8 inches outside of deployment, so he kind of had his run of the center of the table to shade step to like a marker and Mordrake's aura and get in position to start dropping bombs. My opponent played, again, very, very cagey, and I really think playing cagey against Ivan is a real mistake. Like, unless you have a crew like my opponent played in the first game where you can play cagey, but you can also spread way out and you can get your models far apart from each other to minimize the effect of Ivan's summons because they are kind of slow. If you're playing cagey and just hanging out near your deployment zone, Ivan's going to get to you anyway, and he's going to summon in your face, and you're never going to get out of your deployment zone, which is pretty much what happened both game 2 and game 3. I ended up summoning a Brocken Spectre off of Amanozako turn 1 and placed the Brocken Spectre on the opposite side, so it was actually engaging Asami.
Oops.
Yeah. So I ended up dropping Amanozako to like 2 wounds turn 1 with Ivan. And then, turn 2 rolled around. I actually went with Ivan first. I summoned a second Brocken Spectre off of Amanozako, so now he had 2 Brockens in his deployment zone right next to Asami. And things went downhill pretty fast from there. I mean, we kind of played the flanks a little bit. Eva went off on the left flank and tried to stop the Tengu from being able to score. He was going for spread them out, and she was able to kind of deny his ability to drop markers and move around in that corner of the table. And then between her locking down that side of the table, and then Ivan summoning the double Brockens, and then Corvus coming in to kind of clean up the pieces, and like he killed a yokai turn 2. I killed Amanjaku. I think killed Amanjaku turn 2, Amanozako turn 2, and like by the end of turn 2, he was already down like 4 models, including his totem. His master had 2 Brock inspectors right next to it, and I had denied his ability to score on the flank, so he ended up actually conceding, which I felt kind of bad because it was a pretty rough game. But yeah,
Well,
So Jesse, oh, go ahead, Adam.
no, it's okay. Continue.
I was gonna say your keyword is pretty slow when it's not
yeah.
teleporting.
Yeah.
So are you using botanists to score ley lines?
So usually I do. In this one, there was a lot of terrain that was going to make it difficult for me to do the deployment thing, and like set up the deployment in such a way that I was able to get the shadow markers out and move my models out of my deployment zone. So in this game, I actually decided I was not going to go with the botanists, and I used Vernon and Wells for the ley line scoring instead. They're a perfectly fine ley line scorer because they have onward. They can still, disengage and then walk and then onward, to get, probably almost 3 walk equivalent worth of AP. And typically speaking, that's enough to get them from one ley line marker to another. So they're not quite as good as botanists. They're fairly durable, and they've got some other cool tricks they can do. But they're a fine ley line runner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, I really like the botanists when you play them in these situations.
Yeah.
They're just incredibly solid models. But clearly, you did something right. You won your game, round 2 and round 3 games 8-1. So, who am I?
Yeah, I mean, really, the two things that it came down to, it was either take 2 botanists or take Vernon and Wells and bank a couple of stones. So I was running, because I had to really do some gamey movement stuff because there was so much terrain on the table, which is the reason I decided to take both the effigy and the nocturne to get that turn 1 movement nailed. That ate into my stone cache a little bit. So if I had taken 2 botanists, I was only going to end up at 3 stones, which is way too low, for an Ivan crew. I mean, even 5 is light, but I didn't want to go below 5. So that's the biggest reason that I took the Vernon and Wells pick instead of the botanists.
I can see it. I can definitely see it. Jake, going into your round 3.
Yeah, so I played against Doug, the other part of that, founders sort of that Boston crew. And I played Mayfang Foreman again, and he played Yoko. What is it? The Unseen? Is that her title?
Yoko too. Yep.
Yeah. Which was cool because I actually knew all about her because we did the deep dive on her. So I was kind of excited to see him play that. He played the most beater crew. All right, let me read to you what he played against me. Kabuki Warrior, Bill, Lone Swordsman, Fahatsu, Hinamatsu, and a Tanuki. So he had 5 big ass beater models, like 9 and 8 point models that just did a ton of damage. So I was like, oh, okay, he's going to come at me hard. What did I have? I did not take the rock hopper this time. I had the Iron Golem, Sparks, 1 survivor, and the rider. That was sort of my ley lines guy was the mechanical rider.
Yep.
Who worked out really well because with Mayfang in there, you can give it fast and you can give it a free move. So between the free move and giving it fast and its push as a 0 action, it's able to get to his deployment zone turn 1, which is exactly what I did. So I gave it the marker and I moved it to a ley line marker on his side of the table turn 1. And my whole thought was, okay, I'm going to nail that down turn 1, and then even if the rider dies, it's going to go to a guy who's sitting on another marker. it didn't die. I was able to kind of just run away after turn one and go score another one. But I really like the way the rider works with Mayfang too. I mean, I don't think there's really anything that can move that fast in the game, without placing at least.
Yeah, no, super fast, super fast. So I was about exactly what I was thinking was if I was to play into this, I'd probably bring like Zoraida with the rider, just being
Yeah.
able to give the rider essentially 5 movement actions and a push,
Yeah. It's like 30 move, I think, is what my rider had turn one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty insane. The other thing that went really well, the MVP of this game was the Iron Golem. So I was able to, through command construct and making it fast and giving it free moves with Mei Fang, I was able to get him basically on the outer edge of Doug's deployment zone on turn two, and I was able to engage Fahatsu, the Kabuki Warrior, and Hinamatsu. So I kind of nailed all three of those models down. And Mei Fang has a ranged, hand out any condition you want on a stat 7. So I was able to keep stunned on Hinamatsu until I could kill her. Because if you have stunned on her, she isn't great.
Yeah. She can't hit those
Yeah.
triggers. So, I mean, she's not doing
Yeah,
much.
she needs to either onslaught or armor pierce. Armor pierce, obviously, against the golem. So without that, she's just kind of like plinking it for 1 or 0 with shielded.
Yeah,
Um,
and if she couldn't get the armor piercing with the onslaughts, I mean, you're still looking at a ton of attacks. Then she can whittle it down, but without being able to hit any triggers, it's just
yeah, and it's
brutalizing.
and it's it's Mei Fang stat 7 against her stat 5, so it was pretty easy to keep that up.
Yeah.
He did have one round where he got it off with the what's it called, the Tanuki can remove conditions, but then I was able to actually command construct to move Hinamatsu out of line of sight of the Tanuki so that he couldn't do that. um, but Hinamatsu was not much trouble. The thing that was really good that he had going on was Fuhatsu was just doing a lot of damage to everything, because he can kind of push around, and I don't know, he doesn't care, he can't ignore armor, but he can just the amount of firepower that he can put out, kind of put me on the defensive a bit and prevented me from scoring a few points. I think the only model I lost, I had the mechanized pork chop as well, and I think that was the only model I ended up losing. Um, but I had claim jump and I couldn't score it because I couldn't get sparks near the middle because Fahatsu was just too dangerous. So I ended up kind of sitting around the edges with him out of line of sight and just in a safe place. But because of that, I was never able to score claim jump with
Yeah,
sparks.
you'd have to like just
Yeah.
risk getting that 1 point, putting him in danger, and
Yeah.
then hope you win initiative and get the hell out of dodge.
And then breakthrough is really easy to score with Mayfang, because you can drop scrap at range, and then you can just ride the rails to it. So I was able to get a point on breakthrough, um, and he actually did a good job of figuring out that I had claim jump and keeping me off that center. He had claim jump, which I never knew because um, he just kind of like he had it on the charm. What's it called? The Kabuki Warrior.
Mhm.
But he never really got away from the Iron Golem, and then ended up dying. So I didn't know until the game was over. But he also had breakthrough, and the other big thing the Iron Golem did was the last turn. So the game was 3-1, but going into the last turn, it could have been a draw because he managed to get his totem with the ley line marker into my deployment zone, touching one of the strategy markers, and he dropped a scheme marker. So he was going to score breakthrough and the strategy with his totem, but through some crazy finagling of command construct to ride the rails, to then activate Mayfang and allow the Iron Golem to ride the rails again and get fast. Like I was able to like just get so many activations out of the Iron Golem that I was able to get him there, get him engaged, and you can't charge her. So push into her and then kill her to prevent those 2 points from being scored. So that brought it from a draw to a 2-point win for me.
It's a big swing. It's a big swing. Yeah, no, I like it. I like her actually. She puts out a crazy amount of markers. The crew is super fast. Um, like really unbelievably fast. How quickly you can get models to the opposite side of the table.
Yeah, I mean they've kind of got everything. They've got the speed. They've got like durability. They've got heavy hitters. I'm really really enjoying playing that crew, and with Mayfang too because she can put a scrap marker out at 8 inches. That's a game changer.
Oh yeah, I mean she can do it. The rider can do it. So you're really just spitting out markers at a range, which is nice. It helps getting, like I said, getting everything across fairly quickly.
Yeah. The other thing that was surprisingly useful, that when I first looked at her card, I didn't think I was going to really use too much, is the summoning of the Metal Gammon, because there's no flip required. It just happens. You just need 2 scrap markers, and then when the Metal Gammon activates, you're going to get another scrap marker back anyway. So it really only costs you 1 scrap marker. And then a lot of times my Metal Gammon, their activation is just walk, drop a scrap marker. And then when I drop that scrap marker, because of Mei Fang, whatever it's touching takes a damage.
Yeah.
So there were so many times where I would kill models that were on 1 wound by just walking up to them.
Yeah.
And it's like 1 damage, no flips.
And they're solid little minions. They really are. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not doing much, but they're going to take at least probably 3 hits to even put down.
Yeah.
You know?
Their economy there, because you're using 1 of her AP, and then you're really getting a lot of use out of them for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, to waste the AP dealing with them is almost, exactly what you want. But yeah, no, I like her a lot. I think she's very good. She'll be seeing some play. So ultimately, at the end of the thing, Jesse took first. Jake took second. Do you know who took third?
Felly, one of the other
Oh,
gentlemen.
Felly.
Felly took third. He lives in the Framingham area, and he comes down to our shop to play pretty often.
Yeah, I love Felly. He's a good dude.
He was
He was playing
Explorers.
Explorers.
Yeah.
Did he go Cooper all 3 rounds? I know he did
I'm
that at the last
actually
event.
not sure what he
I'm
played
not sure
this
either.
time. I know he had some new masters. I think
okay.
he was playing Jedza, but I don't think he played Cooper all 3 rounds like he usually does.
Interesting. Yeah, that round 3, I'm thinking probably Zoraida in that. I think I do Zoraida and I do the Hooded Rider. Just being able to move 33 inches, 33 inches in a turn. I mean,
with Assassinate and Zoraida being relatively a relatively durable master with a good screen, who can also score Assassinate pretty well with Hooded Rider.
Yeah, and then you have Claim Jump with the Kurgan.
Yeah, Claim Jump with Kurgan. Spread them out is pretty trivial for her to get if you hire in some
Silurids.
It's just a great pool for her.
Yeah, I really like it a lot. And then not even that, you also have the counter ability of being able to move their football carriers, with an Obey or whatever. So I really like her in that. But hey, it sounds like it was a great event. How many players in total?
I think we had 18.
18.
I think it was 18. Yeah.
That's a solid turnout. Yeah. I'm really loving what's going on with this New England meta.
We're looking forward to. I think we have another tournament coming up, second week of January. I think in Western Mass,
January 11th, I believe.
Something like that. Yeah, I think it's the 8th. It's the 8th.
Yeah. If you are in the New England meta, I know we've been talking with the local TOs, but we are planning on putting together some kind of regional championship, like a tournament circuit. Initial thoughts are running it from Captain Con in February to somewhere in October. And that way we can have kind of an off season for a November, December, January kind of holiday season where it's always tough to get games in and stuff. I know for me, it's almost impossible. So,
yeah. And we have another convention in October in New England that we'd be able to run like a finals tournament at.
Yeah. Cool. And we do like a regional finals. Yep. So far, it looks like everybody's on board. We have a really supportive and really together meta. Everybody's really cooperating very nicely. So that's looking good. But congrats.
Yeah, we've actually heard from some other play groups recently too. Like there's some folks from Southern Maine that chimed in and said that they were playing There's a couple of folks in New Hampshire that have been playing and coming down to the North Boston, like the Saugus location,
I would love to get
Battlegrounds to play. So
that
yeah,
New Hampshire group back together.
yeah, those some solid dudes.
Yeah, Live Free, Daichi. It was a solid tournament.
Indeed.
But yeah, no, it sounds like you guys had a great time. I'm glad that the meta around here is doing well and is healthy. We've pretty much had a monthly tournament for the past, I want to say 7 months.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's been
Yeah,
pretty
and
solid.
Turnout's just amazing. I mean, and looking ahead at Captain Con, I mean, between the people who are going to be there for the Invitational and then just how big the local meta is, I think we're already going to be around 40 players, and that's
Yeah.
before people we don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
you're looking at, with the MCCI, you're looking at 20 players coming in for the Friday. If they're coming in for the Friday, there's no reason they're not going to stay for the Saturday and the Sunday. So you're looking at starting the 2-day 50 Soulstone GG at like 20 players right off the rip, 21 depending on who's running the thing, and then you got at least another 18 to 20 just in the local meta.
Easily. I mean, there's folks that are going to be traveling in for it that aren't even participating in the MCCI, just regular public players, that kind of thing. So it's going to be pretty awesome. And I got to say, one big shout out to the Saugus group, the guys that put on this event that we're talking about today. The times that we've been up to their events, I have been thoroughly impressed with the quality of their tables, the terrain that they put out. Some of it is like all the tables are very thematic. Most of the terrain is very functional, and the tables all look absolutely incredible. And they've already said that they're going to be willing to bring down as many tables as they can to make sure that we've got great terrain and great table setups at every single table for both events. So big shout out to Doug, Sam, Brandon, and all the other guys who might help us get terrain in and get things set up.
Yeah, they really motivated that player base over there, and really revitalized Malifaux in that area. So big props to them. They've been doing a hell of a job over there.
Indeedy. So any of you guys have any other closing thoughts?
I'll tell you what, I'm excited about this MCCI thing. I'm not even going to lie to you. There's been a whole lot of effort that's been put into this thing.
Yeah.
And I know it's I felt bad about it because I've been just absolutely like balls to the walls busy just between like work and family stuff over the past couple of months. And I haven't really been able to devote a lot of attention to it. But I mean, after Christmas, there's definitely going to be some promotional stuff going out. Mayflower actually just got a hold of me today and was like, "Oh, I can't wait to go. I'm so excited." She's like wicked excited to come up here. So that's going to be awesome. She's good people. Yeah, I mean, everybody's excited about this. It's going to be a big deal. We're looking into options of maybe having a couple rounds streamed. We're kind of working through the kinks in that because we really want to make this a high-profile event.
Yep.
I'm going to be...
And for anybody that's going to be traveling in, I mean, there are quite a few folks that are going to be getting in Thursday night. I mean, pretty much anybody who's playing in the MCCI is going to get there Thursday night. So my intent is to try and get there as early as I can get into the hall and set up tables. That way, if anybody wants to just play and have open tables, that they'll have them available. And then I'm sure there's going to be some folks, going out, grabbing drinks, grabbing dinner, what have you. I am probably going to get a room rather than driving back and forth. I haven't decided for sure, but I'm sure there's going to be some late night gaming going on. The last time we did a con, we had a fantastic late night werewolf session. That was a hell of a lot of fun.
That is almost more fun than the tournament usually is what the shenanigans that happen on Friday and Saturday night.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
it's pretty good
and
stuff.
this time we get Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Oh
night.
boy,
it's going to be great.
I'm very stoked about it.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
I took vacation time, so I don't have any problems. I shouldn't be missing anything.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
We'll see how that works.
Cool. I guess that should pretty much wrap us up. So with that said, as ever, keep the conversation boring and stay weird, folks.